Have you ever looked in the mirror and not recognized the person staring back? Not because you've changed physically, but because somewhere along the way, you lost the ability to trust your own eyes, your own memory, your own mind. You find yourself asking, did that conversation really happen the way I remember? Am I going crazy? Why do I still miss someone who hurt me so deeply? There's a form of psychological abuse so insidious that survivors often don't realize they've been through it until years after it ends. It doesn't leave bruises you can photograph. It rewires your brain in ways neuroscientists can now measure. And here's the part that sounds impossible. It can make you feel intensely attached to the very person destroying you. Close your eyes. Take a slow breath. Tonight, we're exploring narcissistic abuse and the science of recovery. The actual research, the documented brain changes, and the evidence-based pathways that lead survivors back to themselves. But there's something you need to know right from the start. What happened to you wasn't your fault, and I can prove it. The brain changes are measurable. The attachment mechanisms are documented. And the recovery process has been mapped by thousands who've walked this path before you. By the time we're through tonight, you'll understand exactly what happened to your brain, why you responded the way you did, and how healing actually works. So settle in. You're safe here. What you're about to discover might finally help the pieces fall into place. Here's what makes narcissistic abuse so difficult to recognize. It doesn't announce itself. There's no moment where someone says, I'm about to systematically dismantle your sense of reality. Instead, it often begins with the most intoxicating experience of your life. The clinical term is love bombing, but that phrase doesn't capture how it actually feels. Imagine meeting someone who seems to understand you completely. They're attentive in ways no one has been before. They remember every detail you mention. The relationship moves quickly. Talk of soulmates, future plans, deep connection, and it feels exciting, not alarming. This rapid pace could suggest that the speed itself is part of the strategy, though survivors often report not recognizing it as a red flag at the time. But here's the reveal that changes everything. This wasn't love, it was the setup. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, narcissistic personality disorder is defined by a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, an intense need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. For diagnosis, individuals must display at least 5 of 9 specific criteria. Research published in the American Journal of Psychiatry indicates that while NPD affects approximately 1 to 2% of the general population, recent network analyses by mental health professionals have identified antagonism as the most central feature of the disorder. What does antagonism actually mean in practice? It manifests as a deep-seated need to dominate, control, and position oneself as superior, often at the expense of others' well-being. This trait appears consistently across both grandiose and vulnerable narcissistic presentations, which could explain why the abuse patterns remain similar, even when the narcissist's outward presentation varies. Then comes the shift. Sometimes it's gradual, small criticisms that escalate, affection that becomes unpredictable. Sometimes it's sudden. A switch flips, and the person who adored you now treats you with contempt. This is the devaluation phase, and it employs specific psychological tactics that researchers have documented extensively. Gaslighting is perhaps the most destabilizing. Named after the 1944 film where a husband manipulates his wife into questioning her sanity, this tactic involves denying your reality. You hear, "That never happened. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things." Based on what we know about repeated reality denial, this could systematically erode a person's confidence in their own perceptions, which appears to be precisely the intended effect. Triangulation brings third parties into the dynamic. Comparisons to ex-partners, inappropriate relationships with others, or pitting people against each other. The pattern suggests this serves to destabilize your sense of security and create competition for the narcissist's attention and approval. Projection involves accusing you of behaviors the narcissist themselves engages in. Research into defensive mechanisms suggests this could serve dual purposes, deflecting attention from their behavior while undermining your credibility. Then there's DARVO: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Studies on manipulation tactics indicate this pattern is remarkably consistent across different narcissistic individuals, which could imply it's either learned behavior or an instinctive, defensive strategy inherent to the disorder. But here's what most people don't realize, and what makes escape so difficult. The cycle doesn't end with devaluation. After the discard, when the narcissist abruptly ends the relationship or withdraws completely, often comes hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner brand. The narcissist attempts to pull you back in with apologies, promises to change, or renewed love bombing. A 2023 study, published in Personality and Individual Differences, examined survivors of romantic relationships with narcissistic and psychopathic individuals. The findings revealed something crucial. These relationships create measurable neurobiological effects similar to other recognized forms of trauma, including stress response activation and post-traumatic stress symptoms. What distinguishes narcissistic abuse from ordinary relationship conflict is its systematic nature and its consistent aim to control, dominate, and diminish the other person's sense of self. The pattern is so predictable that researchers can map it. Idealization, devaluation, discard, hoover. Understanding this pattern becomes the first step in recognizing that what you experienced wasn't your fault, wasn't caused by your inadequacies, and wasn't a reflection of your worth. It was a pattern, and you just happened to be the target. Here's something that might surprise you. Scientists can now see the effects of narcissistic abuse on brain scans. This isn't metaphorical damage. It's not just feeling hurt after a bad relationship. What happens during prolonged exposure to narcissistic abuse creates measurable, observable changes in brain structure and function. And understanding this can be profoundly liberating, because it means your symptoms aren't character flaws. They're injury responses. The clinical term for what many survivors experience is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or C-PTSD. The distinction from regular PTSD is crucial. Post-traumatic stress. Disorder typically results from a single overwhelming event. Complex PTSD emerges from prolonged, repeated trauma of an interpersonal nature, particularly when escape feels impossible. Psychiatrist Judith Lewis Herman laid the groundwork for understanding this in her landmark 1992 book, Trauma and Recovery. She recognized that survivors of chronic abuse experience not just fear-based trauma symptoms, but fundamental disruptions in how they regulate emotions, how they see themselves, and how they relate to others. In 2019, the World Health Organization's International Classification of Diseases, 11th revision, officially recognized C-PTSD as distinct from regular PTSD. This was a turning point, validating what survivors had been describing for decades. Here's the reveal that makes everything click. Research indicates that up to 33% of individuals in abusive relationships develop complex PTSD symptoms. But when researchers specifically examined narcissistic abuse survivors, the numbers were staggering. A 2024 dissertation from the University of Missouri St. Louis found that 73.3% of female survivors met the clinical criteria for CPTSD. Nearly 3 out of 4 survivors had developed a documented trauma disorder. So, what's actually happening in the brain? Neuroscience research using brain imaging has revealed specific changes in key regions. The amygdala, your brain's alarm center, can become hyperactive. Studies show this results in constant vigilance. You're always scanning for danger, always bracing for the next explosion, even when no actual threat exists. The hippocampus, crucial for memory, can actually shrink in response to chronic stress. This helps explain the confusion survivors describe. Why can't I remember details clearly? Based on what neuroscience has revealed, this could be your brain protecting you by regulating what it stored and how. Perhaps most significantly, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, shows reduced activity during and after trauma. This could explain why survivors often describe feeling like they can't think clearly or make decisions the way they used to. It's not personal failure, it's measurable brain change. The emotional dysregulation that follows makes perfect sense given these neurological shifts. Intense mood swings, sudden anger, overwhelming sadness, or emotional numbness. These aren't signs of instability. They're evidence of a nervous system that learned to operate in survival mode and hasn't yet learned it's safe to stand down. Many survivors describe dissociation, feeling disconnected from their bodies, emotions, or even reality itself. Research on complex trauma suggests this is actually a protective mechanism, a way the mind creates psychological distance when experience becomes too overwhelming to process. But here's the twist that changes everything. These changes aren't permanent damage. The brain has remarkable plasticity, the capacity to heal and rewire itself. The hippocampus can grow new neurons. The prefrontal cortex can regain function. The amygdala can learn to calm down. But this healing requires specific conditions: safety, proper support, and evidence-based interventions designed for trauma recovery. Understanding that your symptoms have neurobiological roots doesn't minimize them. It validates them. You're not weak for struggling. You're experiencing normal responses to abnormal circumstances. Here's the question that haunts almost every survivor. Why did I stay? And the question that comes after. Why do I still miss them? If you've asked yourself these questions, feeling confused and ashamed, what I'm about to explain might be the most relieving information you encounter on this journey. Because there's a neurobiological reason you couldn't leave, a documented psychological phenomenon, and it has nothing to do with weakness or poor judgment. The phenomenon is called trauma. Bonding and understanding it can free you from years of self-blame. The story that might help this make sense happened in Stockholm in 1973. An escaped convict took 4 bank employees hostage during a 6-day standoff. When police finally rescued them, something impossible seemed to happen. The hostages sympathized with their captor. They defended him. They demonstrated hostility toward the people who'd rescued them. They called it Stockholm Syndrome, but they didn't fully understand the mechanism until researchers Donald Dutton and Susan Painter published groundbreaking work 2 decades later, in 1993. They identified 2 features that create powerful emotional attachment in abusive situations: a power differential and an intermittent pattern of treatment alternating between good and bad. But here's the reveal that explains everything. Your brain was being hacked. During the love bombing phase, your brain flooded with dopamine and oxytocin, the same neurochemicals involved in falling in love and maternal bonding, in all our deepest attachments. You formed an intense connection. This was real. Then came the devaluation, the withdrawal of affection, the criticism, the cold treatment. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the trap springs. When someone you're deeply attached to becomes unpredictable, sometimes loving, sometimes cruel, your brain doesn't simply disconnect. Based on principles of behavioral conditioning, it actually intensifies the attachment. Think of a slot machine. If it paid out every single time, you'd quickly lose interest. If it never paid out, you'd walk away immediately. But when it pays out unpredictably, sometimes after 3 tries, sometimes after 30, it creates one of the most addictive patterns known to psychology. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and research suggests it's the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool that exists. Your brain got caught in that exact pattern, the trauma bond. Research from Dutton and Painter revealed something crucial. Even 10 months after a relationship ends, that bond can remain powerfully intact. A 2023 study examining trauma bonding in narcissistic relationships found that PTSD symptoms themselves may keep victims bonded to their abusers. As survivors struggle with intrusive thoughts and flashbacks, they paradoxically often feel more attached to the person who caused the trauma. This suggests a cruel irony. The injury strengthens the attachment to the one who inflicted it. Here's what this means. The fact that you stayed, that you went back, that you still feel that pull, none of this is evidence of weakness. It's evidence that you're a human being with a nervous system that responded exactly as human nervous systems do when subjected to intermittent reinforcement paired with isolation and reality distortion. You weren't weak. You were caught in one of the most powerful psychological traps that exists. And understanding the mechanism is the first step toward breaking free. Now we reach the part that might restore your hope. Recovery isn't just possible, it's backed by decades of research. And some results are remarkable. The first step is often the hardest. Acknowledging what happened, not just recognizing the relationship ended badly, but naming it as abuse. For many, this acknowledgement is complicated by self-doubt. After all, you spent months being told your perceptions were wrong. Safety becomes paramount. For many, this means no contact with the narcissist. Research consistently shows this is the most effective way to break the trauma bond. The narcissist will often engage in hoovering, attempts to pull you back through promises of change or manipulative tactics. No contact removes their ability to continue the cycle. For those who share children, structured contact becomes necessary. Limit communication to logistics only. Use email rather than phone calls. Keep interactions brief and businesslike. Finding the right therapeutic support is crucial. A 2024 dissertation from the University of Missouri St. Louis found that many survivors felt judged when seeking help from therapists who approached it as ordinary relationship conflict. What you need is a trauma-informed therapist who understands your responses were survival strategies. Now here's where the science gets exciting. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, has demonstrated remarkable effectiveness. The statistics might surprise you. 84 to 90% of single trauma victims no longer had PTSD after just 3 90-minute sessions. For combat veterans, 77% were free of PTSD after 12 sessions. Studies published in 2021 found that trauma-focused therapies like EMDR showed 60 to 80% effectiveness rates, with many complex PTSD survivors reporting significant improvement within 12 to 16 weeks. Not months or years, weeks. EMDR works through an 8-phase protocol. While focusing on a target memory, you engage in bilateral stimulation, typically following the therapist's finger with your eyes. This process, which appears to mimic how the brain processes experiences during REM sleep, helps reprocess traumatic memories in ways that reduce their emotional charge. For narcissistic abuse survivors specifically, EMDR helps process incidents of gaslighting and manipulation that continue triggering distress. It aids in identity reconstruction, helping you reconnect with suppressed aspects of yourself. And importantly, you don't need to verbally detail every trauma. The focus is on reprocessing rather than retelling. Other evidence-based approaches include trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which helps challenge distorted thought patterns that developed during abuse, and dialectical behavior therapy, which teaches skills in mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, all crucial for recovery. Somatic. Approaches like sensory-motor psychotherapy recognize that trauma is stored in the body. These therapies help you reconnect with body sensations and rebuild the mind-body connection that abuse disrupted. Many survivors find somatic approaches reach wounds that talk therapy alone cannot. One of the most profound challenges of recovery is the work of rebuilding your sense of self and self-worth. After months or years of having your reality, your character, and your value systematically redefined by someone else, you might find yourself asking a question that's both simple and devastating. Who am I? The narcissistic abuse survivor often describes feeling a kind of emptiness when trying to identify their own preferences, values, or desires. After so long molding themselves to meet someone else's ever-changing demands, after so long being told that their thoughts and feelings were wrong or invalid, there's a disconnection from the authentic self. You might struggle to answer questions like, what do you enjoy? Or what matters to you? Because you've lost touch with the internal compass that once guided those answers. Dr. Claire Jack, a psychotherapist specializing in working with survivors of narcissistic abuse, describes this as having a poor sense of self, difficulty defining where you end and others begin, trouble identifying your own likes and dislikes independently of what others want or need. If your boundaries were violated from an early age, particularly if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you may never have developed a strong sense of this is me versus this isn't me. Rebuilding identity begins with reconnecting with your body. This might sound strange, but trauma survivors often become disconnected from physical sensations and body wisdom. Your body actually holds knowledge of who you are, even when your conscious mind feels lost. Simple practices like closing your eyes and asking your body where the true sense of you is stored can begin to rebuild this connection. Perhaps you notice a warmth in your chest, a tingling in your hands, a sense of groundedness in your feet. These physical anchors can help you reconnect with your authentic self. Boundary work is essential for developing a stronger sense of self. Boundaries define where you end and others begin. They protect your time, energy, emotional space, and physical space. After narcissistic abuse, boundaries may feel either non-existent or rigidly overprotective. Learning to identify your limits, communicate them clearly, and enforce them consistently is a gradual process that strengthens your sense of self. Starting small helps. Practice saying no to minor requests. Express a different opinion in low-stakes conversations. Choose what you want to watch or eat, even if it's different from what others prefer. These small assertions of self, practiced with safe people, gradually build confidence in your right to have preferences and needs. Based on what psychologists understand about skill building, this incremental approach could be more effective than trying to set major boundaries before you've practiced with smaller ones. The inner critic that developed during the abuse needs to be examined and challenged. Many survivors report that they can still hear their abuser's voice in their head, criticizing and belittling them. Part of recovery involves recognizing whose voice that is, not your own, but the internalized abuse, and learning to replace it with self-compassion. Asking yourself, whose voice is that, when the inner critic speaks, can help you identify it as external programming rather than your authentic self-assessment. Inner child work can be particularly powerful in this process. The concept comes from various therapeutic approaches and involves connecting with younger versions of yourself. The child who first learned to suppress their needs, the teenager who learned to doubt their worth. These wounded parts of yourself need love and nurturing from you, not from external sources. Many survivors find that speaking to these inner younger selves with the kindness and protection they needed, but didn't receive, begins to heal deep wounds and rebuild self-love. Journaling serves as a tool for self-reflection and reconnection. Regular writing, even just a few minutes a day, helps you track your thoughts, feelings, and progress. Prompts like, what am I feeling right now? What positive things did I accomplish today? What do I need? What would I tell my younger self? Can guide you back towards self-awareness. Over time, reviewing your entries shows you patterns, growth, and the evolution of your healing. This documentation could serve another purpose too. Validating your experience when doubt creeps in, as written records provide concrete evidence that counters the gaslighting effects that may linger. Rediscovering your values is another crucial step. After organizing your life around someone else's values and priorities, you may have lost sight of what actually matters to you. What kind of person do you want to be? What principles do you want to guide your life? What legacy do you want to create? These aren't questions with quick answers, but sitting with them gradually clarifies your authentic values. Celebrating your strengths and achievements, no matter how small, rebuilds self-esteem. After constant criticism and devaluation, you've likely lost sight of your good qualities and accomplishments. Making a deliberate practice of acknowledging what you did well each day, what strengths you demonstrated, what you can be proud of. This gradually shifts the internal narrative from "I'm fundamentally flawed" to "I'm a person with inherent worth." Many survivors describe a gradual awakening process, a slow return to themselves. Interests and hobbies that were suppressed or criticized during the relationship begin to resurface. Your sense of humor returns. You notice moments of genuine joy. You make a decision based purely on what you want, not on what would please or appease someone else. This rebuilding is not about creating a new self from scratch. It's about excavating the self that was always there beneath the layers of abuse and conditioning. It's about dusting off the parts of you that were buried, healing the parts that were wounded, and integrating them into a stronger, more authentic whole. Recovery from narcissistic abuse is not a linear process with a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's more like a spiral, where you circle through different stages, sometimes revisiting earlier challenges even as you make progress. Understanding this non-linear nature can help you maintain hope when healing feels frustratingly slow, or when you find yourself struggling with issues you thought you'd already overcome. The initial stage often involves shock and denial. Even after leaving, many survivors describe a period of numbness or disbelief. Did it really happen? Was it really that bad? Am I overreacting? This stage is a natural, protective mechanism, allowing your psyche to gradually absorb the reality of what you experienced, rather than being overwhelmed all at once. As shock wears off, grief often emerges. You're not just grieving the loss of the relationship, but grieving the person you thought the narcissist was, grieving the future you imagined, grieving the time lost, grieving the person you were before the abuse. This grief can be intense and unexpected. You might find yourself crying at odd times, feeling waves of sadness that seem to come from nowhere. This is normal and necessary. Grief cannot be bypassed. It must be moved through. Anger typically follows or intermingles with grief. Anger at the narcissist for the harm they caused. Anger at yourself for staying or going back. Anger at others who didn't see or help. Anger at the injustice of it all. This anger, while uncomfortable, is actually healthy and important. It's your psyche's way of asserting that what happened to you was wrong, that you deserved better. The key is learning to express and process anger in healthy ways, rather than directing it inward or letting it consume you. The bargaining stage involves what-if thinking. What if I had done things differently? What if I had been more patient, less needy, more understanding? What if I go back and try again? This stage can be dangerous because it pulls you back towards self-blame and can tempt you to re-establish contact. Recognizing bargaining thoughts for what they are, a normal stage of grief, not accurate reflection of reality, helps you move through them without acting on them. Many survivors experience what might be called the enlightenment stage, where the pieces suddenly click into place. You read about narcissistic abuse, and feel like someone is describing your exact experience. You understand the manipulation tactics. You see the patterns clearly. This stage brings both relief, validation that you weren't crazy or oversensitive, and renewed pain as you fully grasp how calculated the abuse was. A common challenge throughout recovery is the trauma bond pull. Even months or years after leaving, you might feel intense cravings to contact the narcissist, to check their social media, to reach out just to see how they are. These pulls can feel overwhelming and can trigger shame. Why do I still want them after what they did to me? Understanding that trauma bonds can take a long time to fully break, and that these pulls are neurobiological rather than evidence of your true feelings or poor judgment, helps you ride them out without acting on them. Setbacks are inevitable and normal. You might be doing well for weeks or months, then have a triggering event that sends you spiraling back into anxiety and self-doubt. You might have a dream about the narcissist and wake up feeling the pull of the trauma bond. You might encounter them unexpectedly and find yourself shaking for hours afterward. These setbacks don't erase your progress. They're part of the healing process. Think of them like the ocean's waves. Sometimes you're in calmer waters. Sometimes a wave hits you, but you're still moving forward overall. Milestones in recovery are worth celebrating, even small ones. The first day you don't think about the narcissist constantly. The first time you enjoy an activity without that background anxiety. The first time you trust your own perception of a situation. The first time you set a boundary and enforce it. The first time you recognize a red flag in someone else and choose differently. Each of these moments is evidence of healing. Building resilience is a gradual process that happens through all these stages. Resilience isn't about never feeling pain or never struggling. It's about developing the capacity to cope with challenges, to recover from setbacks, to maintain hope even when things are difficult. Every time you move through a difficult moment, without returning to old coping mechanisms, you're building resilience. Daily self-care practices support your healing journey. Mindfulness and grounding techniques help anchor you in the present moment when trauma pulls you into the past. After narcissistic abuse, your mind may constantly replay old conversations, analyze what you could have done differently, ruminate on the injustice of it all. Mindfulness, the practice of bringing your attention gently back to the present, interrupts these loops. Simple grounding techniques can be practiced anywhere. The 5-4-3-2-1 exercise involves naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This sensory inventory pulls you out of your head and into your body and environment. Box breathing, breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, signaling safety to your body. Body scan meditations, where you bring gentle awareness to each part of your body in turn, help rebuild the mind-body connection that trauma disrupts. You might notice where you're holding tension, jaw, shoulders, stomach, and practice consciously releasing it. This practice also helps you tune into body wisdom, learning to recognize what safety versus danger feels like in your physical experience. Physical movement helps discharge the stress hormones that flood your body during and after trauma. You don't need intense exercise. Even gentle movement makes a difference. Walking, stretching, yoga, dancing in your living room, gardening, any movement that feels accessible and sustainable helps your nervous system process and release stored stress. Yoga has particular benefits for trauma survivors. Trauma-sensitive yoga practices emphasize choice, safety, and body awareness. They help you reconnect with your body as a source of wisdom and strength rather than just a container for pain. Based on research into trauma and the body, practices that combine movement with present moment awareness could be particularly effective at helping the nervous system recalibrate. Creative expression provides a nonverbal outlet for processing trauma. Art, music, dance, writing, crafts. These activities access parts of the brain and psyche that talk therapy alone doesn't reach. You don't need to be skilled or create anything good. The act of creating itself is healing. Many survivors find that creating something beautiful, whether a painting, a garden, a piece of music, a well-decorated space, is a powerful counter to the destruction that abuse caused. It's a way of asserting that you can bring beauty and meaning into the world, that you have generative power, not just the capacity to survive, but also to create. Establishing routine and structure helps a nervous system that learned to be constantly vigilant. After living with unpredictability and chaos, knowing what to expect from your day provides a foundation of safety. Regular sleep and wake times, consistent meals, predictable evening routines. These simple structures signal to your nervous system that life is manageable and predictable. However, it's important to keep routines flexible enough to allow for bad days. Part of self-care is recognizing that some days you won't function at your best, and that's okay. Building in flexibility means you won't catastrophize when you can't stick to your routine perfectly. Remember that self-care isn't selfish. After months or years of being called selfish for having any needs at all, prioritizing your well-being can feel wrong or indulgent. But self-care is survival. It's how you build the strength to heal. It's how you prove to yourself, through actions, that you matter and are worthy of care. One of the most frightening aspects of recovery is contemplating new relationships. After narcissistic abuse, the landscape of human connection feels dangerous and uncertain. How do you learn to trust again when the person who hurt you most was the person you trusted most? How do you distinguish genuine kindness from manipulation? The first crucial step is learning to recognize what healthy relationships actually look like. Many survivors realize they didn't have a clear template for this before. Perhaps you grew up with narcissistic parents, so unhealthy dynamics felt normal. Perhaps the narcissistic relationship was your first serious relationship, setting a skewed baseline. Part of recovery involves educating yourself about the characteristics of healthy connections. Healthy relationships are reciprocal. Both people give and receive. Both people's needs matter. There's a balance of support, not one person constantly sacrificing while the other takes. In healthy relationships, you can be yourself without constant fear of criticism or abandonment. Your boundaries are respected. Your feelings are validated, even when the other person disagrees. Conflicts are resolved through communication, not through manipulation or punishment. Healthy relationships are consistent. The person you see in public is the same person they are in private. Their treatment of you is relatively stable, not wildly swinging between adoration and cruelty. You can predict that they'll generally be kind, respectful, and safe. This consistency allows trust to build gradually. Healthy people take responsibility for their actions. When they hurt you, even unintentionally, they apologize genuinely without making excuses or turning it around on you. They don't engage in darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. They can acknowledge their mistakes and make genuine efforts to change behavior. In healthy relationships, you can say no without catastrophic consequences. You can have different opinions. You can have a bad day without being punished for it. Your emotional responses are treated as valid rather than being labeled as oversensitive or crazy. You're not constantly walking on eggshells, scanning for danger, adapting yourself to avoid triggering anger. Rebuilding trust in your own judgment is perhaps the most important step in building new connections. After being repeatedly told that your perceptions were wrong, you learn to doubt your instincts. Relearning to trust your gut feelings about people is a gradual process. Start by noticing your body's responses to people. Does being around them make you feel relaxed or tense? Do you feel energized or drained after spending time with them? Your body often knows before your mind consciously recognizes whether someone is safe. Learning to attend to these somatic cues helps rebuild trust in your own discernment. Notice patterns in how people treat others, not just how they treat you. How do they speak about their ex-partners? How do they treat service workers? How do they respond when they don't get their way? These behaviors reveal character more reliably than charm or attention directed at you. Red flags that once seemed subtle may now be glaringly obvious. Love bombing, the intense early attention and premature intimacy might have felt romantic before. Now you can recognize it as a manipulation tactic. Boundary violations, the subtle or overt disregard for your stated limits, become clearer. Gaslighting attempts, the suggestion that your memory or perception is unreliable, trigger immediate alarms. Look for green flags, not just the absence of red flags. Does this person respect when you say no? Do they have a stable sense of self, or do they seem to need constant validation? Do they demonstrate empathy and consideration? Can they handle conflict maturely? Do they speak respectfully about their past relationships? These positive indicators matter as much as watching for warning signs. Communication about your history is a personal choice. You don't owe anyone your trauma story, but at some point in a developing relationship, it may feel right to share that you've experienced abuse and are continuing to heal. How someone responds to this disclosure tells you a lot. Patience, compassion, and respect for your boundaries are green flags. Pressure to get over it, minimization of your experience, or impatience with your healing process are red flags. Building a broader support community beyond romantic relationships provides connection without the added vulnerability of romantic intimacy. Friendships, mentoring relationships, community involvement, creative collaborations. These connections can be deeply fulfilling and help you remember that you're capable of healthy relationships. Remember that being alone is not the same as being lonely. After narcissistic abuse, many survivors find that intentional solitude feels safer and more peaceful than the chaos of the abusive relationship. There's no rush to fill that space. Taking time to truly be with yourself, to rebuild your relationship with yourself, creates a solid foundation for eventually welcoming healthy connections with others. Ultimately, the goal is not to become cynical or closed off, despite what you've experienced. It's to develop what might be called wise trust, the ability to trust appropriately, to let safe people in gradually, to build connection, while also protecting yourself. This balanced approach allows for the authentic human connection you deserve without the vulnerability to manipulation that led to being abused. We've traveled through difficult territory tonight: the nature of narcissistic abuse, its neurobiological impact, the invisible chains of trauma bonding, the science of healing, and the path toward reclaiming yourself. If you're a survivor, you might feel overwhelmed by the scope of what lies ahead. But here's what I want you to hear most clearly. Healing is possible. It's not just theoretically possible. It's actually happening for thousands of people every day who've walked this same path. You are not broken beyond repair. What happened to you was a terrible violation of your trust, boundaries, and sense of reality. It left real wounds that need real healing. But those wounds do not define you. You are the person who survived it, and in surviving, you've already demonstrated extraordinary strength. The fact that you stayed, that you went back, that you believed the lies, that you lost yourself for a while. None of this is evidence of weakness. It's evidence that you're a human being with a nervous system that responded exactly as human nervous systems do when subjected to sophisticated manipulation. Recovery doesn't mean you'll forget what happened or stop being affected by it entirely. It means that the abuse will no longer be the center of your life. It means you'll rebuild trust in yourself and carefully extend trust to safe others. It means you'll experience moments of genuine peace and joy that become more frequent. It means you'll integrate the experience into your story without letting it write your whole story. The research we've explored tonight shows that trauma-focused therapies like EMDR have 60 to 80% effectiveness rates, with many survivors reporting significant improvement within 12 to 16 weeks. These aren't just statistics. They're thousands of real people who found their way back to themselves. There will be hard days ahead. Days when the pull of the trauma bond feels unbearable. Days when you doubt your progress. Days when you want to give up. On those days, please remember, setbacks are not failures. They're part of the spiral path of healing. Every time you choose yourself again after a setback, you strengthen your recovery. Reach out for help when you need it. Find a trauma-informed therapist who understands narcissistic abuse. Join a support group. Lean on safe friends and family. You don't have to do this alone. Be patient with yourself. Extend to yourself the same compassion you would give a dear friend going through this. Speak to yourself gently. Celebrate small victories. Forgive yourself for the days when you can barely function. You're doing the hardest work a person can do. One day, perhaps sooner than you think, you'll wake up and realize you've gone hours, then days, without that constant background hum of anxiety. You'll notice that you trust your own judgment again. You'll find yourself in a conversation where you speak your truth without fear. You'll feel a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. These moments are coming. You've already survived the worst of it. The abuse is over, even if the healing is ongoing. You are already stronger than you know. You are already more resilient than the person who tried to break you could imagine. And you are already, right now, worthy of all the care, compassion, and support you need to heal. Rest well tonight. Tomorrow is another step forward on this long journey home to yourself. And if you found some comfort or insight in this exploration of narcissistic abuse recovery, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel and perhaps share this with someone else who might need to hear it. Let's build a community of survivors supporting each other toward wholeness. Be kind to yourself. You deserve it. Good night.